So picture this. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And your phone on the nightstand just starts vibrating.
Never a good sound.
Never. You wake up, you squint at the caller ID, and your stomach just immediately drops because it's one of your drivers. You pick up, and through the static, you hear the words literally every Linehaul manager dreads, "I just dropped my trailer."
Oh, man. Yeah, that is the ultimate nightmare.
Right. I mean, an 80,000-pound box just detached from the fifth wheel and is currently sitting dead in the middle of the southbound lane of Interstate 95. And the thing is, in about 3 hours, the Department of Transportation is going to be sitting in your terminal. They're going to be drinking your bad break room coffee and asking you to prove with a paper trail and training logs that this catastrophic failure was not your fault. And the question is, like, can you do it?
That really is the nightmare scenario for the audience we're speaking to today. Because we are looking directly at you, the line haul manager, the person sitting behind that bank of monitors, tracking a whole fleet of moving dots across a digital map.
Yeah, carrying the weight of all of it.
Exactly. Carrying the operational and legal weight of dozens of drivers out there on the open road. It's a heavy burden.
The pressure is just relentless. I mean, managing a fleet of commercial drivers has got to be one of the most high-stakes, nerve-wracking professions in the whole logistics world. You've got these professionals operating 80,000-pound missiles at, 65 miles per hour through unpredictable traffic, bad weather, construction zones.
And other drivers who have no idea how trucks work.
Exactly. And the maddening part for a manager is this constant feeling of helplessness. Like, you send out memos, you put up those laminated safety posters in the break room.
Right, the ones nobody reads.
Yeah, nobody reads them. You hold safety meetings, you bring in donuts, but when that truck actually leaves the gate, you're just constantly wondering if any of the training actually stuck.
Well, the source material we're diving into today, it actually confronts that feeling of helplessness head on. It really strips away the traditional excuses of fleet management. And it highlights two massive systemic hurdles that you face when you're trying to ingrain the right behaviors in your drivers. And honestly, the first hurdle requires a pretty uncomfortable look in the mirror for a lot of managers.
It really does. I mean, the source points out that managers often struggle to teach the correct safety and compliance procedures because they themselves might not fully know them, or at least they aren't confident in them.
Which is so common, right?
Yeah, we see this all the time. A manager might have come up through dispatch, or maybe they have a degree in supply chain logistics, but they've never actually held a commercial driver's license themselves. So they know the theoretical rules, sure, but they don't intimately understand the granular day-to-day physical procedures inside the truck.
And that creates a devastating knowledge gap. Because if a manager is even slightly fuzzy on the nuances of, say, hours of service compliance or the mechanical intricacies of a pre-trip inspection, that fuzziness doesn't just transfer to the driver. It magnifies.
Like snowballs.
Exactly. I mean, you simply cannot enforce a standard that you cannot flawlessly articulate yourself.
Right. And then the second hurdle the text identifies is the operational philosophy around the training itself.
Yeah.
Because the industry standard, unfortunately, is to treat training as a one-and-done event. It's just orientation day.
The good old day one data dump.
Exactly. A new driver comes in, they watch a super dated safety video from the 1990s, they sign a massive stack of HR paperwork, they pass a basic road test in the yard, and then you just hand them the keys and say, good luck, don't hit anything.
Right. And the document we're analyzing today fundamentally rejects that model. I mean, it states unequivocally that bad behaviors are not corrected by a signature on a piece of paper. They're changed through continuous, relentless training.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because our mission today for this deep dive is to dissect what this source material presents as the ultimate blueprint. We are talking about the holy grail of commercial fleet management, which is achieving a Tier 5 safety rating.
The gold standard.
Right, the absolute highest. Now, for anyone maybe listening outside the industry, Tier 5 isn't just a fun gold star you put on your website. This is the absolute highest safety and compliance rating possible. It's a composite metric that's highly scrutinized by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the DOT, and your insurance providers.
Yeah, hitting Tier 5 dictates everything. That dictates your insurance premiums, your liability footprint, and especially for contractors, whether the parent company will even allow you to keep moving their freight.
Right. It is literally the difference between a thriving, highly profitable business and one that gets entirely shut down by a federal auditor.
And achieving that Tier 5 status requires a highly structured, two-pronged approach, according to the text. First, you implement a hyper-thorough on-site onboarding session. And we're not talking about a passive classroom lecture here, but an active physical gauntlet.
A real workout.
Exactly. And second, you follow that up with relentless, continuous training throughout the entire year, using what the text calls the 8-pillar training method.
Okay, so before we jump into those 8 specific pillars, I think we need to examine the pedagogical core of this source text, because the entire framework sort of rests on a very specific mechanism of teaching. The text insists that managers must physically teach the behaviors. Like, they must literally show the driver the correct procedure, and then they must have the driver demonstrate it back to them.
Right, show and demonstrate. That's the mantra. It is a closed feedback loop. You completely bypass the theoretical, and you engage the physical. The manager performs the action, vocalizing the steps as they go, and then hands the responsibility to the driver to replicate it under observation.
It's brilliant because it builds immediate muscle memory.
Yes, and it instantly exposes any comprehension gaps before the driver ever leaves the yard. You don't want to find out they don't know how to do something when they're 1,000 miles away.
Absolutely not. So let's establish the foundation. Let's talk about day 1. The on-site onboarding phase. Because you really can't implement continuous, relentless training if the baseline isn't set perfectly. Like, if day 1 is compromised, day 100 is going to be a disaster.
Without a doubt.
So the source material outlines 9 non-negotiable steps for onboarding to achieve Tier 5.
And rather than just reading them as a dry list, we should look at how they conceptually group together. Because the first phase is all about physical verification. You are showing them how to review equipment inspections, how to manage trailer connections, and the proper door and dock pull procedures. You're orienting them to the sheer mass and physics of the equipment.
Okay, yeah. And then you move into the compliance and operational zone. So you train them on the tractor binder, which holds all the physical legal paperwork. You train them on ELD Use, that's the electronic logging device. You cover gate procedures so they actually know how to get in and out of the terminal securely.
Super important.
Yeah, and you cover accident procedures. And you also introduce them to VEDR management, which is the video event data recorder, basically the internal and external dash cameras.
Right. And finally, you hit the 9th step, which is arguably the most critical and honestly the most psychologically demanding phase of onboarding. And that is completing a mock DOT stop.
Okay, this is where I actually have to push back a little bit on the source material. The mock DOT stop. The text says the manager needs to physically walk out to the truck, have the driver sit in the cab, and literally act out a roadside inspection by a Department of Transportation officer. Isn't this just a bit, I don't know, theatrical? I mean, these are professional drivers with commercial licenses. Do managers really need to be out in the yard doing improv role play? It feels a little condescending, maybe even silly.
I get why it sounds that way, but you have to look at the psychology of it. The amygdala doesn't know the difference between a theatrical role play and a life-altering threat.
Wait, really? The brain just reacts?
It just reacts. When a driver is rolling down the interstate and those blue lights suddenly flash in their mirrors, their body undergoes a massive physiological shift. Their heart rate spikes, cortisol floods their entire system, and their fight-or-flight response just completely kicks in. And stress fundamentally degrades executive function.
Oh, I see. They get tunnel vision.
Exactly. I mean, even a driver with 20 years of experience gets nervous during a DOT audit. The officer approaches the window, right? They're armed, they're carrying the authority of the federal government, and they're looking for violations that could cost the driver their livelihood and saddle your company with thousands of dollars in fines.
The stakes are incredibly high.
They are. And in that moment of intense stress, complex cognitive recall goes right out the window. If you just told them in a classroom on day 1, hey, the registration is in the green binder behind the passenger seat, and here is how you navigate the ELD tablet to transfer your logs, they are going to freeze.
Oh, yeah. They'll start fumbling around, opening the wrong compartments, pressing all the wrong buttons on the tablet, sweating.
Exactly. And from the DOT officer's perspective, fumbling looks like non-compliance. The officer thinks, well, if this driver doesn't even know where their registration is, they definitely haven't done their pre-trip inspection today. Let's pull out the creepers and get under the truck. The inspection instantly escalates.
Wow. So it goes from a routine check to a full audit just because they looked nervous?
Precisely. However, if the manager executed the mock DOT stop during onboarding, they engaged that show and demonstrate philosophy. The manager knocked on the window, played the officer, and demanded the ELD manual and the electronic logs. By forcing the driver to physically reach behind the seat, physically grab the binder, physically tap the screen to initiate a data transfer. You're carving a neurological pathway.
You're building an automatic physical response that bypasses the stressed out brain.
That's exactly. So when the real high-stress situation occurs, muscle memory takes over. The driver doesn't have to think. Their hand just automatically goes to the binder. They calmly hand over the paperwork. The DOT officer sees a confident, prepared professional, checks the boxes, and sends them on their way.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, the mock DOT stop turns a chaotic, terrifying event into just a boring, routine checklist. It inoculates the driver against panic.
That reframes it entirely for me. It's not role play, it's stress inoculation. I love that. Okay, so onboarding day is complete. The driver has successfully demonstrated all 9 steps. They have the keys, and they are officially dispatched. How do we structure the continuous training to ensure these behaviors don't degrade over time?
Well, this brings us to the 8 pillars. The source material structures these conceptually by starting with the driver's most intimate, immediate environment, and then it sort of extends outward into the broader operational world.
Right. So pillar 1 is in-cab safety. This is the inner sanctum. For a line-haul driver, the cab of that truck is their office, their dining room, and sometimes their living room for up to 11 hours a day.
It's their whole world. And the source focuses heavily on the physical and visual discipline required in this space. It mandates continuous training on cell phone management to eliminate distracted driving, proper seatbelt use, maintaining in-cab cleanliness, and strict adherence to VEDR camera rules.
I want to spend a minute on in-cab cleanliness, because I feel like it's super easy for a manager to overlook this. A driver might say, look, I spend all day in here. If I leave a couple of empty energy drink cans and fast food wrappers on the floorboard, that's my business. It doesn't affect the freight.
Right, they see it as a personal space issue.
Exactly. But I think of this the same way I think about commercial aviation. Like, when you look into the cockpit of a Boeing 737, you don't see trash all over the floor. You don't see the co-pilot's jacket draped over a navigation screen. Why? Because cleanliness isn't an aesthetic choice. It is about operational focus and physical safety.
And the physics of the cab demand it. Think about it. If a driver is doing 65 miles per hour and a car suddenly cuts them off, they have to initiate emergency braking. The kinetic energy shifts everything in that cab forward.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So if the cab is cluttered, a full heavy metal water bottle rolling around the floorboard can lodge itself squarely underneath the brake pedal. The driver goes to press the brake, hits the bottle, and physically cannot depress the pedal.
That is terrifying.
It is a catastrophic, potentially fatal collision caused entirely by a lack of housekeeping.
So cleanliness actually is a Tier 5 safety protocol. The manager really has to continuously inspect the cabs and enforce a standard of pristine operational readiness. But, even more critical than the rolling water bottles is the VEDR camera system, the video event data recorder. This is the dual-facing dash camera, one lens looking out at the highway, one lens looking inward at the driver.
And this is arguably the most sensitive topic in fleet management today, the inward-facing camera. Drivers absolutely hate it.
Oh, they despise it.
They do. It feels intrusive. Feels like Big Brother watching their every move. But the source material is incredibly explicit on this. Achieving a Tier 5 rating demands a zero-tolerance policy for VEDR manipulation. The cameras must be working, they must be aligned properly, and they must never, ever be obstructed.
Zero tolerance. Okay, let's play out a scenario here. Say a manager is doing their morning review of the telematics data. They pull up a hard-braking event video from one of their top drivers from the night before. But when they click play on the inward-facing camera, the screen is just like a wall of gray fabric. The driver has taken their baseball cap and casually draped it over the lens. Or maybe they tilted the sun visor all the way down so it blocks the camera's view of their face.
Right, which happens all the time. And the instinct of the driver is understandable, honestly. Maybe they were eating a messy sandwich and didn't want the AI camera flagging them for distracted driving. Or maybe they just wanted a moment of privacy.
Well, sure.
But as a manager, you cannot let that slide for a single shift. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to bring that driver into the office and explain the legal reality. The camera is not there to micromanage their snacking habits. The camera is the only objective witness you have when a passenger vehicle does something illegal and causes a wreck.
Right. The zero tolerance rule is really a liability shield. Because if that camera is blocked during a fatal accident, the opposing lawyers will definitely argue that the driver covered the camera specifically because they were doing something wrong, like texting or sleeping or watching a movie on their phone.
Yeah, the jury will absolutely believe him. By covering the camera, the driver destroys their own exoneration. The manager has to explain that keeping the camera clear is about saving the driver's career, keeping them out of prison, and protecting the company from nuclear verdicts. You really have to monitor that VEDR dashboard relentlessly and correct an obstruction the very same day it happens.
Okay, so Pillar 1 locks down the inner sanctum. Now we open the door and step outside the cab, but we aren't on the highway just yet. We are in the terminal. Which brings us to Pillar 2, focusing on terminal safety.
Yeah, and the terminal is its own unique ecosystem. It is a highly constrained, highly congested environment filled with moving heavy machinery, massive blind spots, pedestrians, and super tight timelines.
A recipe for disaster.
Exactly. So the source identifies several critical procedures here. Proper gate procedures for security, proper fueling procedures to prevent environmental spills, proper door and dock pull procedures to prevent equipment damage, and the overarching terminal speed limit.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The source material mandates a maximum terminal speed limit of 10 miles per hour. Let's be honest, 10 miles per hour in a massive rig feels excruciatingly slow.
It feels like you're standing still.
Right.
Yeah.
You can practically fast walk at that speed. I can easily see a driver, especially one who is maybe bumping up against their hours of service limit, thinking, the yard is relatively empty, I'll just do 15 or 20 to get to the dock faster. It's no big deal.
But the physics of a commercial vehicle make it a massive deal. Let's examine the difference between 10 miles per hour and 15 miles per hour in a truck pulling a 53-foot trailer.
Yeah.
It's not about the speed of the cab, it's about the geometry of the turn.
Oh.
When a tractor trailer makes a turn, it experiences something called off-tracking. The rear wheels of the trailer do not follow the same path as the front wheels of the cab. They actually take a significantly tighter radius.
They cut the corner.
Precisely. So if a driver is rushing to meet a dispatch time and swings through the yard at 15 mph, their momentum carries the cab slightly wider, and their reaction time to monitor their mirrors decreases.
Yeah.
They initiate a turn around a row of parked trucks to back into a dock. At 15 mph, that off-tracking happens aggressively. They misjudge the swing, and the tail of their trailer clips the aerodynamic mirror off a parked truck, or worse, shears the fiberglass hood right off.
Wow. A completely avoidable fender bender.
And look at the ripple effect of that. Because the driver wanted to save maybe 45 seconds by speeding, they now have to stop. They have to find a manager. They have to fill out an incident report. They have to take photos. The equipment has to be taken out of service and routed to the maintenance shop. The load is delayed.
Such a headache.
They just cost themselves and the company 2 hours of productivity and thousands of dollars in repairs. The manager's role in continuous training is to constantly observe the yard. If you see a truck doing 12 mph, you flag them down. You drill that 10 mph rule until driving through the terminal feels like a crawl, because that crawl completely eliminates terminal accidents.
Okay, so we've secured the cab, and we've navigated the terminal without hitting anything. The driver is physically safe, but physical safety is really only half the battle for a Tier 5 rating. The other half is compliance. The driver has to interface with the technical, bureaucratic requirements of the job, which naturally brings us to Section 3, mastering the machine, covering Pillars 3 and 4.
Right, because a modern commercial truck is basically a rolling data center at this point. It generates an immense amount of telemetry and compliance data every single second. So Pillar 3 is entirely dedicated to ELD SHAF. Use the electronic logging device. This is that tablet mounted on the dashboard that tracks engine hours, GPS location, and the driver's legal hours of service.
And the source material lists a barrage of highly technical training requirements for the ELD. The manager must train the driver on, how to unmount the ELD, proper form and manner, properly certifying logs, accepting and rejecting unidentified driving events, using personal conveyance, taking adverse conditions, and making proper log annotations.
It's a lot.
Oh.
And this is where we circle back to the very first hurdle the source text identified, the manager's own knowledge gap. If a Linehaul manager doesn't intimately understand the software interface of the ELD and the federal regulations governing it, they're essentially steering their drivers into a compliance minefield.
I can see this being a major point of pushback for a lot of managers. They might say, look, I manage logistics, I'm not a software engineer or a DOT compliance lawyer. How on earth am I supposed to teach a driver the legal difference between adverse conditions and personal conveyance?
I get the frustration. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to realize that the DOT auditor isn't going to care about the manager's background. They only care about the data. Let's take one of the most dangerous traps on the ELD interface, unidentified driving events.
Right. This happens when the truck moves, but nobody is logged into the tablet, right?
Correct. So say a mechanic gets into the truck, to move it from the fuel island to the maintenance bay. They don't log into the ELD because they're just a mechanic, not a driver. The truck moves 2 miles. The ELD records those 2 miles as unidentified driving. The next morning, the actual driver gets in, turns the key, logs into the tablet, and a prompt pops up on the screen. This vehicle moved 2 miles yesterday. Do you accept this driving time?
And if the manager hasn't used the show and demonstrate method to teach the driver how to properly review and reject those specific events, the driver might just hit accept to clear the screen, giving themselves 2 hours of fake driving time. Or, worse, they just ignore it completely.
Exactly. And if they ignore it, those unidentified miles just sit in the back end of the system. Months later, a DOT auditor arrives at your terminal to determine if you get to keep your Tier 5 rating. They download the ELD data into their software, and it flags thousands of miles of unidentified driving across your entire fleet.
Oh, boy.
The auditor doesn't assume it was a mechanic moving trucks in the yard. The auditor assumes you were running a rogue operation. They assume your drivers are intentionally logging out of the system to illegally drive over their maximum hours.
Wow. The auditor assumes you are hiding fatigued drivers. And just like that, you are hit with massive compliance fines, your safety score plummets, and your Tier 5 rating is just vaporized.
All because the manager didn't sit in the cab, point at the screen, and physically show the driver the exact sequence of buttons to reject unassigned miles. It's that granular. And the same exact peril applies to adverse conditions.
Okay, that one sounds like a trap. What exactly defines an adverse condition?
Under FMCSA rules, adverse driving conditions allow a driver to extend their driving window by up to 2 hours to complete a run.
That sounds helpful.
It is, but the catch is that the condition, whether it's a massive snowstorm or a catastrophic traffic pileup, must have been completely unknown and unpredictable before the drivers started their shift.
Ah. So if a blizzard is all over the morning news and the driver dispatches anyway, they can't claim adverse conditions when they eventually get stuck in it.
Exactly. They should have planned their trip better. So if a manager doesn't fully grasp that strict legal definition, they might casually tell a driver over the phone, hey, traffic is bad in Atlanta, just hit the adverse conditions button so you don't run out of hours. The driver does it. The DOT audits the log, pulls the weather and traffic reports from that specific day, sees the delay was predictable, and cites the driver for an hours of service violation.
Ouch. The manager's ignorance just became the driver's legal liability.
Precisely. The manager must master the machine first.
Which brings us to Pillar 4, equipment inspections. So we are stepping away from the software now and getting back to the heavy iron. This pillar covers the physical integrity of the vehicle.
Yes, and the source details the requirements for completing a DVIR from the Driver Vehicle Inspection Report. It mandates rigorous pre-trip, in-trip, and post-trip inspections. It covers documenting and reporting defects, and crucially, it covers securing trailer connections and taking trailer connection photos.
The trailer connection photo is the detail I really want to obsess over for a minute. The physical procedure is pretty well known. The driver backs the tractor under the trailer, the fifth wheel plate slides under the trailer apron, and the locking jaws snap around the kingpin. The driver gets out, crawls under the trailer with a flashlight, and visually verifies that the jaws are locked. But why does the source material insist that the driver must then pull out their company's smartphone or tablet and take a physical photo of those locking jaws? Isn't the physical check enough?
The physical check proves the trailer's connected in the yard. The photo proves the trailer was connected in a court of law.
Oh, wow.
Let's go back to the scenario we opened the show with. The dropped trailer on Interstate 95.
The ultimate nightmare.
Let's look at the timeline. The driver does a perfect pre-trip inspection at the terminal. They visually check the jaws. They are locked. They hit the road. 3 hours later, they pull into a crowded, dimly lit truck stop to grab a coffee and use the restroom. While they are inside, someone, maybe a disgruntled former employee, maybe just a vandal, pulls the fifth wheel release arm on the tractor.
Oh man, a silent sabotage. That's terrifying.
It is. The driver comes back, does a quick walk around, but fails to get all the way under the dark trailer again. They get back on the highway, accelerate to 65 miles per hour, hit a slight bump, touch the brakes, and the 80,000-pound trailer slides right off the fifth wheel, crashing onto the pavement and causing a massive multi-vehicle pileup.
The DOT arrives. The state police arrive. The personal injury lawyers arrive.
And their entire narrative will be that your driver was negligent. They will claim the driver never properly hooked up the trailer back at the terminal. And if you only trained the driver to do a visual check, it is just the driver's word against a massive catastrophe. You have zero proof.
It's indefensible.
However, If you relentlessly enforced Pillar 4, and you train that driver to always take a time-stamped, geotagged photo of the fully engaged locking jaws before they put the truck in gear,
The narrative instantly flips.
it completely flips. You produce the photo. The photo definitively proves the mechanism was secure when the driver took possession of the vehicle. The investigation immediately shifts away from driver negligence and towards mechanical failure or criminal tampering at the truck stop. That single photograph is the ultimate liability shield.
That's incredible.
It is, but here's the hard truth for managers. Getting a driver to crawl under a greasy trailer in the rain to take a photo every single day requires exhausting, continuous enforcement. You have to audit those photos daily until the driver feels practically naked, leaving the yard without taking one.
That is the essence of relentless training, isn't it? So we've mastered the inner cab, the terminal, the ELD, and the physical equipment. But as that dropped trailer scenario perfectly illustrates, doing everything right in the first 4 pillars does not make you immune to chaos. External forces will eventually force your hand, the state will audit you, and the laws of physics will cause accidents.
This shifts the tone of the deep dive entirely. We are moving from prevention to crisis management. Pillars 5 and 6 deal directly with the worst-case scenarios, because no matter how robust your safety bubble is, it will get tested.
Okay, Pillar 5 is roadside inspections. We established the psychological groundwork for this with the mock DOT stop during onboarding. But Pillar 5 is about maintaining that readiness in perpetuity. Onboarding was the vaccine. Pillar 5 is the daily booster shot.
The source material is adamant that mock DOT stops should not be a one-time event. Managers must continuously practice roadside stops with their drivers in the yard. It keeps the muscle memory sharp. But beyond the role play, Pillar 5 mandates strict audits of the physical paperwork.
You mean the tractor binder?
Yes. The manager must verify the validity of the tractor binder. They must ensure the vehicle registration, the annual DOT inspection report, and the insurance cards are not only physically present in the binder, but that they are legible and current.
I can easily imagine a scenario where a driver is eating lunch in the cab, spills a thermos of coffee all over the binder, ruins the insurance card, and just throws it away thinking, I'll ask dispatch to print me a new one next week.
Exactly. And then they get pulled over at a weigh station that afternoon. The officer asks for the insurance, the driver doesn't have it, and boom, a compliance violation is attached to your DOT number.
Just like that.
But the most granular and perhaps most frustrating detail in Pillar 5 revolves around the required ELD documents. The FMCSA mandates that 4 specific physical items must be in the cab at all times: the ELD instruction manual, the DOT data transfer instructions, the ELD malfunction instruction sheet, and 8 days of blank paper logs.
Wait, let's focus on those blank paper logs. 8 days. Why exactly 8? And what happens if an auditor asks for them and the driver only has, say, 6 blank pages?
What's fascinating here is the sheer bureaucratic inflexibility of the regulations. The FMCSA rule is 8 days because if the electronic tablet suffers a catastrophic hardware failure, the driver is legally permitted to reconstruct their hours on physical paper graphs for up to 8 days, while the company routes the truck to a terminal to repair or replace the device.
Oh, so it's an emergency backup system.
Precisely. Now imagine a driver gets pulled in for a Level 1 inspection. The tablet is working perfectly. The officer checks the electronic logs, and everything is 100% legal. The officer then asks to see the emergency backup logs. The driver pulls out their clipboard, counts the blank pages, and realizes they used 2 pages last month to write down directions to a hard-to-find warehouse. They only have 6 blank pages left.
Completely innocent mistake.
The DOT officer does not care. The federal regulation mandates 8 days. The officer writes a citation for failing to possess the required ELD materials. That violation goes on the driver's record, it hits the company's compliance, safety, and accountability score, the CSA score, and it acts as a direct headwind against achieving your Tier 5 rating.
A multi-million-dollar business metric degraded because of 2 missing pieces of blank paper. That is honestly mind-boggling.
Which is why the manager must continuously audit that binder. Every time you see a driver in the terminal, you should be asking, hey, show me your 8 days. It takes 5 seconds, but it prevents a massive headache on the side of the highway.
You're really building an atmosphere where compliance is just breathing. Which brings us to Pillar 6, accident procedures. Basically, the absolute worst day on the job for both the driver and the manager.
Right, and the source outlines a strict protocol for when the inevitable happens. It details post-accident procedures, the requirement for taking comprehensive post-accident photos, the absolute importance of the VEDR video, cooperation with law enforcement, and a very specific reporting timeline reporting to the manager by the end of the shift.
I want to dissect that reporting timeline for a second. By the end of the shift. Depending on the severity of the accident, that almost feels generous. Like if a truck rolls over on the highway, the manager's going to know instantly. But I assume this rule is built for the minor incidents.
It is entirely built for the minor incidents. Let's look at the psychology of a minor scrape. A driver is at a crowded truck stop in Ohio. It's midnight, it's raining, they're exhausted, backing into a super tight spot between two other rigs. As they pivot the trailer, the rear bumper taps a concrete protective bollard. They hear a crunch, they pull the parking brake, get out in the rain with a flashlight, and see they cracked a piece of fiberglass on the trailer fairing.
Okay, so nobody is hurt. No other vehicles were involved. No property damage other than the company's own trailer.
Right. And the driver's internal monologue goes something like this. I have 10 hours of mandatory rest ahead of me. I am exhausted. If I call my manager right now, I have to fill out an incident report, I have to upload photos, the manager has to wake up the safety director, and I'll be on the phone for an hour. It's just a cracked piece of plastic. I'll get some sleep and just report it when I wake up tomorrow.
It is an incredibly human logical progression. I get it.
But it is an operational liability time bomb. Let's follow the domino effect.
Yeah.
What if, unbeknownst to the driver, when that bumper hit the concrete bollard, it didn't just crack the fiberglass? What if the impact pushed a metal bracket upward and severely pinched the blue airline that supplies air to the trailer brakes?
Oh, no. That changes everything.
The driver goes to sleep, wakes up, does a sloppy pre-trip inspection because they are running late, and gets on the highway. They hit traffic, apply the brakes, and that pinched airline bursts. The trailer brakes lock up entirely, the truck jackknifes across 3 lanes, and causes a massive collision.
And now the real investigation starts.
Exactly. The forensic investigators will pull the telematics data and the VEDR video.
Yeah.
They will see the impact with the bollard the night before. They will see that the driver continued to operate a damaged vehicle without notifying management and without a mechanic clearing the equipment for operation.
Wow. It transforms from an accident into gross negligence.
The end-of-shift reporting rule is the hard stop that prevents those dominoes from falling. It forces the driver to bring the manager into the loop immediately. The manager, sitting at their desk, objective and unemotional, can make the call. Do not move that truck. We are sending a mobile mechanic out to inspect the undercarriage before you drive another inch. Enforcing that reporting timeline literally saves lives.
That is so powerful. And then, once again, the source material aggressively circles back to the VEDR video. It brings it up under accident procedures with a stark, almost existential warning. I actually have the quote right here. Failure to have video due to a camera malfunction or obstruction is a breach of contract and can cause the contractor to lose his contract entirely.
We are talking about the ultimate consequence here. This isn't just a DOT fine or a ding on your safety score. If you are a line-haul contractor moving freight for a massive logistics parent company, your operating agreement hinges on transparency. If your driver covers the inward-facing camera because they want privacy and they have a fatal accident, the parent company will immediately pull your contract.
Because you breached the core safety terms by destroying the video evidence.
Your entire business, the livelihoods of all your drivers, your mechanics, and your office staff will just be wiped out overnight because a driver draped a hat over a lens and a manager didn't continuously train them not to. This is why the zero-tolerance policy we established in Pillar 1 is the absolute bedrock of Pillar 6.
Transparency above all else. So what does this all mean? We've covered the physics of the yard, the bureaucracy of the ELD, the mechanical reality of the equipment, and the crisis protocols. But at the end of the day, someone has to physically sit in that seat, steer the wheel, and manage their own emotions while interacting with dispatchers, mechanics, and other motorists.
Which brings us to our final section, the human element, Pillars 7 and 8. Because everything we've discussed so far is essentially building the arena. Pillars 7 and 8 deal with how the driver actually behaves inside that arena.
Let's start on the highway. Pillar 7 is defensive driving. This is the bread and butter of keeping the shiny side up.
The source provides a very robust kinetic checklist here. It mandates continuous training on maintaining a proper following distance of a minimum of 3 seconds, a maximum contract speed of 65 mph, proper seatbelt use, understanding the physiological dangers of night driving, how to handle fatigue driving, navigating inclement weather, safely executing lane changes and merging, and again, zero tolerance for obstructing, dismantling, or damaging VEDR cameras.
I really want to combine the 65 mph maximum speed and the 3-second following distance. I like to visualize this concept for drivers. Like every commercial truck on the road should have a massive, invisible safety bubble surrounding it.
I like that framing. But we really need to explain the physics of the bubble.
Right, because an 80,000-pound truck is not a Honda Civic. You can't just slam the brakes and stop on a dime.
No, it's entirely about the dissipation of kinetic energy and the mechanical realities of the air brake system. When a driver in a passenger car hits the brake pedal, hydraulic fluid instantly clamps the brake pads. When a truck driver hits a pedal, air has to travel through lines all the way to the back of the trailer to engage the S-cams. There is a literal time delay. It's called air brake lag. At 65 miles per hour, that truck is traveling nearly 100 feet per second.
Wait, 100 feet per second, which means by the time the brakes actually engage, the truck has already covered a massive distance.
Exactly. It takes the length of roughly 2 football fields to bring a fully loaded tractor-trailer to a complete stop from highway speeds. That 3-second gap isn't just a polite suggestion. It is the mathematical baseline required to dissipate that kinetic energy if the car in front of them suddenly slams on their brakes.
So if the driver stays at 65 mph, the mathematical bubble remains structurally sound. But if they creep up to 75 mph, the bubble stretches thin, the kinetic energy squares, and they literally outdrive their brakes. And if they ride 1 second behind a bumper, the bubble is popped before they even have a chance to react.
Right. But the challenge is, how does a manager enforce an invisible mathematical bubble when the truck is 3 states away?
Through the telematics and the VEDR cameras.
Yes. This is why the source text obsessively mentions the camera in Pillar 1, Pillar 6, and now Pillar 7. The manager must actively monitor following distance events triggered by the camera AI. If you see a video clip where the driver is tailgating, you pull them into the office. You show them the video. You explain the kinetic energy. You ask them, if that car hits a deer right now, where does your truck end up? You force them to realize they are driving a lethal weapon.
The camera really is the manager's proxy in the cab. Without it, the manager is just blind.
Which is exactly why dismantling or intentionally damaging the camera is listed in Pillar 7 as a major defensive driving violation. Damaging the camera is an intentional act to blind the manager. It is a catastrophic breach of trust that simply cannot exist in a Tier 5 operation.
Speaking of trust and interpersonal dynamics, that leads us perfectly into the final pillar, which I think will genuinely surprise some people listening. Pillar 8, human resource procedures.
Yeah, this is a vital pillar that often gets relegated to a dusty binder in traditional trucking companies. But the source material rightly elevates it to the exact same operational level as equipment inspections and ELD compliance.
The details to cover under HR procedures are pretty intense, actually. Avoiding toxic behavior, preventing sexual harassment, managing workers' compensation procedures, avoiding workplace conflict, and actively avoiding workplace violence. Now, if I am a seasoned Linehaul manager, I might be thinking, look, I am a logistics expert. I optimize routes and manage maintenance schedules. I am not a corporate HR representative or a therapist. Why on earth is workplace conflict listed as a safety pillar?
Because the cab of a truck is not an isolated vacuum. A driver brings their physiological state into that cab with them. If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the psychological state of a driver who just engaged in a screaming match with a dispatcher.
Oh, man. Let's say the dispatcher gave them a terrible load assignment that pays poorly and forces them to drive through a major city during rush hour.
Exactly. The driver gets furious. They storm out into the yard. Maybe they have a toxic confrontation with the mechanic because their truck wasn't fueled up. By the time they climb into the cab, their heart rate is elevated, their adrenaline is pumping, and they are fuming.
They are biologically agitated.
And then they put an 80,000-pound vehicle in gear and hit the interstate. An angry driver is an incredibly dangerous driver. Their cognitive focus is entirely on the argument they just had, constantly replaying what they should have said to the dispatcher, rather than focusing on the road ahead. Their reaction times plummet. They are highly susceptible to road rage. They start driving aggressively, tailgating, speeding, completely ignoring every mathematical rule we established in Pillar 7.
Wow, they pop the safety bubble because they are mad. So enforcing HR procedures like shutting down toxic behavior, demanding professional communication, and resolving workplace conflict immediately isn't just about fostering a nice corporate culture. It is a literal preventative safety measure. It keeps the driver's brain calm and focused before they ever turn the key.
Precisely. And let's look at the financial and operational devastation of the other HR elements, like workers' compensation procedures. The source mandates continuous training on this. Why? Because the manager's immediate response to an injury dictates the entire legal and financial outcome.
So, if a driver slips on an icy step getting out of the cab and hurts their back, how the manager handles that phone call actually matters.
It matters immensely. If the manager isn't trained on the precise protocols, how to document it, where to send the driver for a medical evaluation, how to secure the truck, a minor injury can spiral into a massive, fraudulent, or horribly mismanaged workers' comp claim that drains the company's resources and flags the DOT. Continuous training on HR procedures transforms the manager into this hybrid, part psychologist, part mechanic, and part legal compliance officer.
Okay, let's take a collective breath because we have covered an immense amount of ground today. And for you, the line haul manager listening to this, sitting at your desk, I want to recap this journey. We started by defining the ultimate nightmare, the drop trailer, the DOT auditor, the loss of control. Achieving a Tier 5 safety rating is not a matter of luck. It isn't just about hiring decent drivers, crossing your fingers, and hoping for the best.
Hope is not an operational strategy.
It definitely isn't. It requires a fundamental shift in how you view your job. You have to first conquer your own knowledge gaps. You cannot teach what you do not understand. You must become the undeniable, granular expert on ELD regulations, the physics of off-tracking in the terminal, and the legalities of the VEDR policies. Once you possess that knowledge, you have to weaponize it through the show and demonstrate method.
Right, you build a robust, physically demanding on-site onboarding program. You force them to act out the mock DOT stop to bypass the amygdala.
And finally, you recognize that onboarding is just the starting line. You have to relentlessly apply the 8 pillars in cab, terminal, ELD, equipment, roadside, accidents, defensive driving, and HR every single day of the year. It is an exhausting, continuous loop of auditing photos, correcting behaviors, and managing psychology.
It is a profound, relentless amount of work. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you walk out into your terminal yard tomorrow morning. It builds on everything the source text insists upon regarding this philosophy of constant training.
Lay it on us.
The central premise of the document is that bad behaviors are only changed through constant training. If we accept that premise as truth, then we must accept a very heavy reality. A driver's mistake is rarely just a driver's mistake. It is almost always a reflection of the manager's training frequency. So as a manager, I want you to ask yourself a question. The next time one of your drivers fails a procedure, whether they get caught speeding through the terminal, or they fail to take a photo of their trailer connection, or they drape a hat over their dash camera, are you looking at their failure to execute, or are you actually looking at your own failure to continuously train?
Wow, that is the ultimate accountability mirror right there. A really heavy question, but the exact right place to leave it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these 8 pillars, look in that mirror, and go build your Tier 5 fleet. We will catch you next time.